The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Maryland basketball coach Kevin Willard says the system is broken. You have to blow it up. But last I checked, we're still going to have a basketball season. And yesterday was media day for the locals. We'll hear from Willard. We'll hear from Ed Cooley, the coach at Georgetown, and talk about the state of the game. It's changed college sports dramatically, the NIL and the transfer portal. But I must say, especially about the football, games have been great. And the NCAA basketball tournament, fun to watch. So the system may be different and it may be broken, but so far, nobody's calling on plans to perhaps call the whole thing off. We'll get into that and a whole lot more. Some football, obviously, to talk about, as there always is this time of year. Yankees looking pretty good as to getting to the World Series. They take a 2-0 lead. We'll get to that and more. Mike Locksley, coach at Maryland. I wouldn't say he's embattled, but a 3-3 record at this point is a disappointment considering the schedule that they played. Very disappointing loss to Michigan State at home. They had their doors blown off at Indiana, though Indiana is ranked and undefeated. And then last week, the Friday night game against Northwestern was a complete disaster. But he is trying to rally the troops. He says, been there, done that, his 16th year at Maryland, not consecutively. But he talks about turning the whole thing around, and we'll get to that and a whole lot more. Let me start with this before we get to a little more football. But this is local football. And, when your team gets good, this happens. Kansas City Chiefs almost never play a 1 o'clock game. They're in the 4 o'clock window. They're on Sunday Night Football. They're on Monday Night Football. They're on Wednesday afternoon football this year because they're a Christmas Day game against the Raiders. I mean, it comes with the territory of being good. And the NFL, a number of years ago, went to the flexing of games so that if you had a really crapola game in a 4 o'clock window or even in a Sunday night game, you could flex it out and swap it out. So this is understandable given the rules that are in place. And I watched it happen around the league, and, you don't really give much thought to it, but then it hits home. So I have a cousin who lives in Chicago, Howard Berger, and he's been a 40-year season ticket holder for the Chicago Bears. And even when Washington has been terrible and the Bears have been sort of, he's made it a point to come to games here, and he's invited me to go to the times that Washington has played in Chicago. It just hasn't worked out for me. But he did come in 5 years ago when they played and was due to come last year, but he thought, well, the Bears are just so awful, so he called the trip off. But this year, you have the two marquee quarterbacks going at it. Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick of the draft, and Jaden Daniels, the number 2 pick of the draft. Daniels has been great through 6 games. In the last couple of games, Caleb Williams is really showing signs of being great as well. So it sets up for a great matchup. And it had been a 1 o'clock game. And maybe we should have known better. I don't know. But when we set this up, when the schedule came out in May, we arranged for Howard to come in with his son and his friend, and then we have a suite with the station, so the 4 of us will go to the game. So yesterday, the NFL looked at the 1 o'clock schedule and said, no, this is too big of a game. We need the A team there with Nance and Romo, so we're going to move this to a 4:25 game. Not even a 4:05 game, but a 4:25 game, which means it bleeds in late and takes you into 60 minutes and all that stuff. Okay, and the league has the right to do this. But it's just another example of how the NFL is a television show. And they do have the right. It's only, I guess, a couple of times that they can do it, but they can even flex out a game from a 1 o'clock start on a Sunday afternoon to Monday night. They have the ability to do that. And, if you look at the revenue for the league, the majority of it comes from television. That's why franchises are selling for north of $6 billion, because the amount of money that the league gets from its media partners is unbelievable, and they have an opt-out coming after the 2029 season where you can be certain the media rights could possibly even double. That's how crazy things have gotten. So it's fine for television, and I'm sure that there are a lot of fans here who are not going to go to the game, or even if you are going to go to the game, it doesn't matter. You know, you Sunday, if you're a football fan, you start watching when the games start. And with these London games, sometimes 9:30 in the morning, and you go all the way to midnight if you watch the Sunday night game. I don't stay up late except when the Commanders play, so it's no treat for me when they get moved tonight. But some people actually appreciate that. And I don't know about the fan base, especially Monday night, dealing with Beltway traffic to get to the game, but it is what it is. And it really doesn't hit you until it hits home. So my cousin Howard, he had arranged for a flight out of Dulles at 10 o'clock on Sunday night. This game is a week from Sunday. They got Carolina here this Sunday, but on the 27th, when the game is going to be played, he had a 10 o'clock flight, which you would make with ease for a 1 o'clock game. It's over 4:30. You get out of the parking lot. It's 40 minutes. You get on the Beltway. You can even have a dinner out. You can even stop off and have a nice dinner before you get on the plane at 10 o'clock. Well, now I don't know if he's going to make it. It's a 4:25 game. If it doesn't go to overtime, you're talking about 7:30. Then getting out of the parking lot is 40 minutes, so it's like 8:15-ish by the time you get on the Beltway. And then you got to rush to get to Dulles Airport on a Beltway that's going to be a little packed. And I looked on Google Maps yesterday. It's 43 miles from the stadium to Dulles. I don't know if you're going to make it before like 9:15, 9:30. Then he's got to return a rental car, got to go through security, and get on a plane at 10:15. I don't know if it's going to happen. So I don't know what he's doing, whether he can change the flight. It means added expense. That's another night in a hotel room for 3 people, or a couple of hotel rooms, however they're staying together. And it just shows you that the NFL doesn't care. And you can hear all you want about Roger Goodell and how we're doing it for the fans. Well, you're doing it for the television audience. That's what you're doing it for. You're not doing it for the fans. And at one time, they had a rule that you couldn't hold a Super Bowl in a stadium that sat less than 80,000 people. That's how San Diego got out of the rotation, even when they still had a team. Even before the Chargers moved to Los Angeles. But they couldn't have it anymore at Jack Murphy Stadium because it was too small. Well, we just had a Super Bowl that was played in Vegas in front of 61,000 people. Used to be an 80,000 minimum. Now 61,000 saw a Super Bowl. And I could see down the road where you might as well just hold these games in television studios. A roaring stadium and some of the classics like Lambeau Field, it doesn't mean much anymore because the fan base doesn't know when the games are going to be. You make plans around them, and they change the game, and it changes your plans dramatically. I'm not saying that kvetching about it is going to change it. It just points out that whatever Roger Goodell says about the fans, it's all garbage. It really is. And if you're going to go to the games, it's nice that the new ownership has patched up as best they can a disaster of a stadium, dumping $75 million into it, at least to make it inhabitable. And they have done as good a job as they can getting cars in and out. But another thing that goes along with the team being good is it's going to sell out. There are games at FedEx Field where you had they would announce, because the season tickets, 50-some thousand. But if you looked around the stadium, there was like 30,000 people there. Well, you have 30,000, it's pretty easy to get out. And especially if the team got clobbered, you could leave early. But if this is a competitive game, and if it goes to overtime, you could have an 8 o'clock finish. And my cousin and his friend and his son aren't going to make their flight. And does the NFL have a policy where they can, make that up to you, pay for an extra night for you to stay in a row? No, too bad. My cousin went with his wife to London last week to see the Bears play. That's how big a fan he is. He's not, the Bears super fan, but he's a fan. And the league is saying, sorry. Oh, you got a flight at 10 o'clock? Yeah, too bad. We're starting at 4:25. And, maybe if you had like a helicopter, maybe you can make it out to Dulles Airport in time for your flight. But, it's Beltway traffic. Just deal with it. Yeah, that's it's kind of the way things work. It is what it is. All right, New York Jets. Let's see if this works. They have given, it looks like, Aaron Rodgers everything he wants, right? His coach, which he may say he loves Robert, But Robert Saleh got fired after 5 games with his team getting ready to play a game that could put them in a share of first place. Okay, so he's out. I guess the compromise was that his hand-picked offensive coordinator, Paul Hackett, is going to get demoted. He can deal with that. The new coach, who cares? But now he's got his old Green Bay security blanket, Davante Adams. Never mind, he's old, and in wide receiver years, he's really almost as old or maybe even older than Rodgers, who's 40 years old. The 32-year-old receiver, he's in the twilight, unless his name is Jerry Rice, and he ain't Jerry Rice. But the deal was made, and Brian Costello, who covers the Jets for the New York Post, shortly after the news broke, came on the Dan Patrick Show to say, this was not in reaction to what happened in the Buffalo game on Monday night. This had been in the works.
Well, it's been a long time coming, Dan. They were trying to get him last year, and the Raiders didn't want to trade him last year. Then they fired their GM and coach at the trading deadlines, and there was rumors this offseason. Rodgers at the golf tournament in Lake Tahoe said he can't wait to play with Davante again. That sparked it. So it's been coming for a while. And, a few weeks ago when Adams requested the trade, the Jets have been in this for a while. But I do think, last night's game probably upped the urgency a little bit to get this done and push it across the finish line.
But if it's true that he's already in the building, he probably had an idea that this was happening during the game last night.
Yeah, I would think so. I'm curious about when he came to New Jersey. But it sounded like the Jets were the only team that was realistic for a trade. They were the leaders all along. So I think they must have known they were close, and then they got it done. Finalized this morning.
What if the Jets had won last night?
I think it still gets done. I think they felt like all along they had to do this. The offense has been struggling for weeks. Clearly, the quarterback wanted this, and he usually gets what he wants. So, like I said, this has been a long time coming. So I do think, when they lost the game last night and the way they lost, and Mike Williams, Rodgers called him out after the game for not running around. I walked out of that building going, I bet Davante Adams is here tomorrow. It just felt that way. But in reality, I do think this has been in the works for a long time. And, these trades get done on Mondays and Tuesdays in the league. And it's the Jets were playing yesterday, so it wasn't going to get done yesterday. So I do think it was all signs were pointing to it happening today anyway. But I do think maybe they pushed it across the finish line because of last night.
What are your expectations now with this team?
I honestly don't think this changes a lot, Dan. I know he's a good receiver, but he's 31 years old. I think he makes the offense slightly better, but I'm not sure he helps stop the run. This is now 2 times this season. There's been a running back who I had no idea who he was, came out and ran all over the Jets. The rookie from Buffalo last night, and then Jordan Mason in week 1 for San Francisco ran all over them. So I think that's a problem. I think the offensive line is still shaky. Rodgers got hit a lot again last night. I don't know if Davante helps that. And I really think what they could use, Dan, is someone who could stretch the field. And that's not Adams at this point. He's more of a precise route runner. Where he does help is these fourth quarter situations. We've now seen 3 straight weeks. The Jets could have won the game in the fourth quarter and didn't. 2 straight weeks where there was a pass to Mike Williams at the end of the game where he didn't look like he knew the ball was coming to him or they weren't on the same page and it got intercepted. Those balls are now going to go to Davante Adams. So I'm curious how this affects Garrett Wilson too, Dan. That's going to be something to watch.
Yeah, agree. I immediately thought of Garrett Wilson just because it always seems like him and Rodgers aren't exactly on the same page, but Aaron knows he has to rely on him. Did you hear Belichick on the Manning cast talking about Woody Johnson last night?
I did. I think that puts any thoughts of Belichick ever coaching the Jets to rest. So I was happy for that. I wouldn't have to chase that story in January. But clearly, look, when Belichick talks about 2000 and I resigned as HC of the NYJ, he talks about the ownership situation. That was when Woody was taking over. Woody was not yet the owner, but he was in the process of becoming the owner. And Belichick always refers to the ownership situation as the reason he left. So he's been clear of his thoughts about Woody Johnson for a long time, I think.
Make the call right now, playoffs or no playoffs?
Playoffs. I think this team is going to go 10-7, Dan. I thought that from the beginning of the year. I still think they've had a bad stretch here, but if you look down the schedule, if you guys call up the schedule later for the Jets, there are winnable games on this schedule. They've got a couple tough ones coming up in the next, like 2 out of the next 3, Texans, Steelers, sandwiched around the Patriots, but there are games that they can win in November and December, and I think they'll still go 10-7.
Brian Costello knows the Jets far better than I do, but it does from the outside look like an implosion. 10-7, for a team that's 2-4. I don't know about that. Bill Belichick, in case you missed this was on the Manning cast on Monday night, what Patrick referred to. This was what Bill Belichick said about the possibility that he might coach the Jets next year.
Peyton, Eli, I'm not a big Jets fan, in case you don't know that. Like Fireman Ed, but that's it. But you know what? Coach Salah did a good job with that program. I mean, he brought in a culture, a level of toughness and competitiveness. Unfortunately, the offense hasn't been what, a lot of quarterbacks last year and a little bit of a slow start. But I thought Coach Slaw really did a good job with this team. And, they're probably not that far away from winning.
Yeah, I mean, one of these two teams is going to win the division. This game is probably going to be the deciding factor. There are 2 matchups, right? So it just seemed quite early to me to be making a head coaching change.
Yeah.
But Bill, you mentioned.
But look,
Bill,
that's kind of what it's been there at the Jets. They've barely won over 30% in the last 10 years. So, the owner being the owner, just ready, fire, aim.
Ready, fire, aim. So that would seem to close the door on that. Also, you heard Belichick mention Fireman Ed. Fireman Ed is. He wears that 42 Jets jersey and a fireman's helmet with Jets colors, and he's been a big part of the scene there for decades. And, for years, when the Jets were absolute crapola and the game would get out of hand, the TV cameras would always find him because he was at least an interesting sight, much more interesting than was going on in the game. Well, guess what? This comes after what Belichick said. Maybe he was spurred by Belichick's comment that he liked him. His real name is Ed Anzalone. And he went on Instagram to say that his screen time on the video boards at MetLife Stadium has been decreasing and that fellow Jets fans are noticing. He said, I've been getting a lot of emails and texts from fans about the Jet experience in the stadium with the big screens. Last night in particular, although on the Denver game also, the Jets scored a touchdown. And normally, as a tradition, we're always put on the screen. This is a fan complaining about the screen time, and he's not getting it to his satisfaction. Obviously, he says, I don't know exactly what's going on, but they're phasing us out. Us, I guess, being the section that he sits with, probably some friends and maybe fellow firefighters, or I guess he's a retired firefighter at this point. He says, I'd like to know if somebody knows, if you please let me know, because it's evident that it's happening and it needs to stop because we need the home field advantage. That's why we need to keep it going. Something is going on, so please let us know if you know something. He's been leading, he gets up on another guy's shoulders. He looks like he's maybe put on a few pounds over the years, so maybe it's the shoulders of a couple of guys right now, and leads the famous JETS chants. Well, this is some history here. This goes back to when the Jets played at the old Giants Stadium, which has since been torn down for this MetLife where they play now, and he started doing this back in 1986. Well, 86 was the year that they won the Super Bowl with Bill Parcells, the first of 2. And he had remained, this is interesting, he had remained a fixture with the Jets through all the lean years, because the Jets didn't get to the Super Bowl, obviously. But he remained a fixture until 2012. You know what the tipping point was? The butt fumble on Thanksgiving night. Mark Sanchez with the butt fumble. That's when he decided he had enough, and he stayed away for, I guess, 2 years, 2013 and 2014, but I guess he couldn't stay away. Came back in 2015 with the Fireman Ed persona, with the jersey and the fireman's helmet. And the league celebrates these fans. The Hogs from back in the day with the Redskins. There's a spot for them in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if Fireman Ed is in the Hall of Fame, but he should be. And he was even put on the Pat McAfee show to react to the news that Robert Saleh had been fired as head coach. So let's tie this up in a bow. I start 15 minutes ago talking about how the NFL really doesn't care about the fans, that they flex these games no matter how inconvenient it is for people like my cousin who have a 10 o'clock flight leaving Washington on a day that he thought the Commanders and the Bears were going to be playing at 1. Now it's 4:25, and there's a question whether he could make it or not. Yeah, I mean that's where the NFL goes. Yeah, and then here's a guy who was with them thick and thin, except when the butt fumble drove him away for a couple of years. But, maybe he's right. Maybe they are phasing him out, and Fireman Ed deserves his screen time. Don't you think? All right, yesterday was local media day for college basketball. I guess Midnight Madness has gone by the wayside. The rules for when you can practice have really been relaxed, and the players stay throughout the summer, and they practice. Maybe the organized practice, there is a schedule. But October 15th used to be Midnight Madness, and it was started by Lefty Driesell at the University of Maryland in 1971 when then Bird Stadium, it's now called CQ Field, and at that time they had a track around it. And so for that time, as the NCAA said, on October 15th, you can start practice. Lefty decided to get a jump on everybody else and had his team run a mile at midnight on the track. And then the next year, they decided, I think it was one of the players, I forget the one who suggested it to Lefty, but he said, hey, why don't we have a scrimmage? And Lefty said, oh, that's a good idea. They didn't even advertise it. Word got around campus. Mo Howard was the player. Mo Howard was a great player from Philadelphia and started in the backcourt for a few years with John Lucas. But he said, let's play a scrimmage at midnight. Word got around the campus. They got out on the floor at Cole Fieldhouse, and there's 8,000 people in the stands, and they were onto something, and that launched Midnight Madness. I guess that doesn't happen anymore. But they do hold media days on the 15th, I guess. That's their day. And Kevin Willard had his at Maryland. We'll get to what Ed Cooley said at Georgetown. They're not playing this year. The series between the two teams will start next year. But they did finally get that together on an annual basis. That'll be a big help for college basketball here. But this was Kevin Willard yesterday talking about the portal, which they weren't able to fully take advantage of last year, which he said hurt them in terms of depth because they were playing a lot of young players when other teams around the country had experienced depth, guys who came from other schools and were able to, once you got to the bench, really put the pressure on Maryland. This year, he's taken advantage of the portal, which he describes thusly.
So there's two big factors in the transfer portal: money and money. So last year going into the season, we didn't have any money, so we couldn't really be overly aggressive in the transfer portal. And this year, thanks to Damon, I have a great group of guys that run the collective. We were able to be more aggressive in the portal because we had more money. So it's kind of a bad cop-out, and I apologize for the excuse. I don't like it, but the reality of the situation is that we had more money to be more aggressive early in the portal than we were before. And so we were able to be aggressive with Jacoby. We were able to be aggressive with guys like Selton, that when we got them on campus for visits, that we just didn't mess around and we could be more aggressive.
So think about how quickly things have changed. I think it's less than 4 years ago, maybe only 3 years ago, where a coach could make a statement like that and everybody would go, of course, that's a joke, right? It's a joke. No, well, now the rules say there's money. Now, the intent of the NIL was that a player could go to a school and work out a deal to, advertise Jerry's subs or sign autographs and get paid for it. No, that's not what it is now. The collective is what they call it. They dump in as much cash as they can, and when players come on campus, they tell them how much they'll be paid. And if it's a deal that's satisfactory to them or they think it's more than they can get someplace else, they sign. That's all there is to it. They don't look at the library. They don't look at the beauty of the campus. They don't look at the major that they can. How much cash? How much cash can you give me? This is not what these guys signed up to do. Now, you don't see Kevin Willard walking away from it because he's got a multi-million-dollar contract. He's making a lot of money, too. It's not like the players are just getting paid. He's getting paid more. But it's not college basketball as it was, less than 4 or 5 years ago. And his solution is quite simple.
It's a broken system right now. It really is. Anybody thinks is not in it every day and not dealing with it. I think the only way that this actually gets fixed is if it gets all blown up and we start over somehow, some way. I don't know if that's within the NCAA, without the NCAA. I don't know if that's – but I think for the best for the players, the best for the fans, best for coaches. It's funny. We've had 7 NBA general managers come here and say, I don't know how you guys do this. We have guys on 6-year contracts, 5-year contracts. We know how to mix and match what to do. And he said, you're literally on a 6-month contract. So it is what it is. I think we've done a great job putting together a really good roster that I'm excited about. But I think my honest opinion, and I know, and I don't blame everybody, no one listens to me, but unless it gets blown up and totally reconstructed, it's going to be like this forever.
Well, what it has to be is professional sports. You sign these guys to contracts, and I think they ought to be 2-year deals. And if a player wants to get out, he has to have a buyout in it. And if the new school wants to pay the buyout, fine. If they don't, he'll have to pay his own buyout, or he has to stay for another year and, kind of suck it up and see what you can do. But this ability to go from one school to the next as soon as you don't like the way a coach looks at you one morning, no, it's not a sustainable system. The games are so good, and that's what's really driving this right now. That nobody's saying, oh, the product stinks. No, the product's still good. But for these guys, this isn't the kind of thing that they thought they would be dealing with when they became college basketball coaches. Now, Ed Cooley, across town at Georgetown, he's holding his own media day, and he's addressing the same thing. And his message seems to be a little bit different than Kevin Willard. He's saying, yeah, the system's broken. It sucks. But we have to adapt. This is what it is. We adapt or we die.
There's been a lot of different changes with the NCAA over the last 50 years. And somehow, some way, we've managed to get on top of it and stay afloat. No matter what we do, there's always going to be a challenge. There's going to be a lawsuit. I'm glad we're able to do what we're doing. I think if we don't lean into it, we'll get lost. If we don't evolve, we will dissolve. And we have to evolve with this landscape because it's not going back in. We have to do something to fix it. What is that? I've been blessed to be on the oversight committee and a couple other committees with the NCAA. And until this House case is settled, not a lot of things could be done. So there's a lot of things that are tabled right now. It is a broken system. And what I think this whole portal thing has done hasn't taught people how to have resilience and resolve. Anything that's easy, they just give up. So failure is good sometimes. Failure brings about an internal drive. And I don't think our kids know how to fail today. They really don't know how to struggle. We, the parents, have bailed them out of everything. If something gets hard, we, the parents, say, okay, baby, I got you. Our era, I guess I'm a boomer, sometimes you just got to figure it out. You just got to figure it out. And there's no dictionary or no thesaurus or life book on figuring it out. You got to go through life, fail, get back up, scratch your knee. Your shoulder hurts. You're not going to have balm for it all the time or Ben Gay to help the pain. Sometimes you just got to suck it up and move on. And I don't know if the system that we're creating right now, and maybe I have to evolve or I'll dissolve with that, but that's just my overall gut feeling on it, my professional feeling on it. We'll get through. But many of us didn't get here by saying help or, you do it for me, right? We all had to get here figuring it out, start at the bottom, work our way through. Everybody now want to go from being an ex-player to the NBA coach of the Celtics or the Wizards. You got to learn how to sweep the floor a little bit. Go get some water, pass out some towels, right? Be a GA. Grind through it. The system's not allowing for the grind.
Well, but you could also flip that around, and I like Ed Cooley, and I think he's incredibly eloquent when he speaks, but he was at Providence. And he decided he wanted to go to Georgetown, which is his right to do. He can work wherever he wants to or where people want him to work. So after growing up in Providence. You know, that was his dream job, and he did a really good job there. And he got an offer that he liked at Georgetown. He left. He didn't have to sit out a year. You know, he could have said, well, I'm not going to go to Georgetown. I'm committed to Providence, and I'm going to stay here until we get a national championship. And if we don't get it, I'm going to die trying. Well, he got out too. So it's become more equitable for the players, so you can understand that as well. But he's right in the fact that what you do as a head coach now is you're not just recruiting for years ahead, you're recruiting your own roster. If you want a guy to stay, you got to make sure you get him to stay. Now, back to Maryland, Kevin Willard's got a guy who he fully understands is going to be one and done. Maryland hasn't had that many of them over the years. Steve Francis was, but Francis had been to a couple of junior colleges before that, so it wasn't like, you know, right a year out of high school. I think Gary had a couple that went like 2 years or something like that. You know, even Joe Smith, who was player of the year, he stayed 2 years and was the number one pick of the draft. There haven't been many that have been one and dones. Kevin Willard understands that the center he got from Baltimore, Derek Queen, is going to be one and done, you know, unless it's a bad season for him. And, you know, I don't even know if it's a bad season for him if he's going to stay for another year at Maryland. But and you don't usually hear a coach talk about a freshman like this. Willard coming off a disappointing year. They were expected to be a tournament team. They were not. Had a really disappointing year. And now he's got a 5-star recruit in Queen. And listen to what he says about this freshman coming in.
Derek's a top 10 player. If I was an NBA GM, I would draft him in a heartbeat. I think there's a huge difference in the fact that he's probably a once in a lifetime generational talent. I mean, he is as skilled a big man as I've ever seen on the court. I mean, his first scrimmage, he was phenomenal playing against someone else. So I think his expectations are totally different than what the freshman class we brought in last year was. And I thought Deshaun last year, although his numbers didn't prove it, played as good as any freshman in the conference for the amount of minutes he had to play. So trying not to put as much pressure on freshmen. Derek's going to be playing with 4 guys that are all juniors and one sophomore.
Oh, actually, one's a senior. But anyway, the point being is he's hyping a freshman coming in. You know, like Lefty used to do that, and Moses Malone was that guy. The problem was Moses only stayed for one class, and then he signed with the ABA. This guy could be on that talent level. Listen to how Willard describes him when asked for a comp on Derek Queen.
You watch him play, and he looks like he's playing like you're watching a 1960s slow motion NBA basketball player. And when I say that, people are like, oh, but then he goes out and gets 24 and 12 in 20 minutes. Like he's I don't want to say Luka or anybody like that because that's putting expectations that are crazy. He just has an unbelievable feel for the game of basketball. He plays it at a speed that you'd want your point guard to play it at. He just sees everything. He doesn't get rushed up. He plays at his own pace. You know, and especially in the college game where the floor is not good for big guys. He's already figured out angles. He just plays at his own pace. And it's when you watch it, sometimes you think it's like he's not playing hard. He's not going. He's just got it all figured out. And there's really no player that I've seen that he reminds me of, just because he's a old school player with understanding the new way that the NBA and college plays with the 5-out spacing and that kind of stuff. He's a unique player.
This is a coach who's saying, I don't like to hype freshmen. He's hyping this freshman. Let's see if he's this good. If he is this good, it could be a hell of a year for Maryland. I mean, basketball's a sport that if you have one of those guys, it makes all the difference in the world. Would have if they would have had Moses, though they had other pros on that team. John Lucas was the number one pick of the NBA draft, and he would have played with Moses on that team in 1974. In fact, Lefty made them roommates so that Lucas would look after him, which he did until Moses left and went to the ABA. All right, coming up, there's an honor that I think is overdue for a former Redskin, and I'll tell you who that is and what the honor should be as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Next hour, I'll look further into what you heard about yesterday with Jerry Jones blowing up at the hosts on his radio show that he does every week. I got a little different slant on it than I've heard from others, and we'll play some of what Jerry said yesterday in what was a 23-minute interview. It wasn't like he got angry and hung up. He hung on until they said it was time to go. So we'll get into that. But I opened the show today, 10 o'clock. I got into 9 o'clock. The anger that I have and the frustration for my cousin, who is coming in for the Bears game a week from Sunday, which was going to be a 1 o'clock game. It is now a 4:25 game, which means that the flight he set up to go home at 10 o'clock at night on Sunday is now very much in question whether they can get there. And the NFL doesn't care because it's a television show. And further evidence of that, as we've had last 2 weeks, and I guess we will have again this week, a 9:30 in the morning game from London. And Michael McCarthy, who writes about business for Front Office Sports, has a story out today that the league is looking into an international package where they would have 16 of these games. So every week, football would start at 9:30 in the morning, 6:30 on the West Coast. They have 5 games this year, 8 next year. Roger Goodell, as you know, wants an 18-game schedule, so eventually it gets to 18. And what does this mean? Means more money. More and more cash, and they think that they can bring the total up to between $1 billion and $1.5 billion for 11 to 13 international games. They're already, and they undersold this, obviously. They're already getting $11 billion a year from local television, and then they're making more money with the deals that they make. They're putting football on Wednesday this year so they could sell it to Netflix on Christmas Day when they know they're going to have a big audience of people at home. And it's just a big money machine, and it's a television show. Never mind, teams have to fly out, overseas, play in these games. Just shut up, we'll give you more money. And the players are going to be on board for this because as revenue goes up for the league, so does their salaries, right? The revenue is tied to the salary cap. So there's going to be some kvetching a little bit, but then they're going to be ready to move on from that because there's going to be more money in their pockets. And this is just the way things are working these days. So anytime that Roger Goodell talks about the great fans, no. He puts games on at night when it's below zero so people have frostbite and lose toes like they did in Kansas City last year. And then you're talking about games that get flexed. Never mind how inconvenient it is for the fans. That's just the way it is. All right. Do you remember Alfred Morris, who was here during the RG3, especially the rookie year? They were both rookies. I remember this so well. That we were doing our shows at training camp when I was working with Zabe, and training camp that year was in Ashburn, and there was great excitement about RG3, but nobody really knew he would be this good. But he was named the starting quarterback as at the start of rookie minicamp, and they had a couple of veteran running backs on the team, nobody of real note, but they figured that they'd have a veteran in the backfield with Griffin, and while we were doing our shows, they would bring us time to time players to talk to. So they bring over this 6th-round draft pick from a team that had won one college game the year before. I think Florida International is where he played, and his name was Alfred Morris, and he seemed like a nice kid. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if he makes the practice squad? 6th-round pick. Well, he winds up as the starting running back because that's the way Mike Shanahan did things. He didn't care about who was making what. He liked bargain running backs because he thought he could plug in anybody, and he obviously was able to do that with Morris because he set a team record for rookie rushing yards, 1,600 yards, averaged 4.8 yards a carry, scored 13 touchdowns that year, and that number, 1,613 yards, 4th most in NFL history for a rookie, trailing only Eric Dickerson, who's in the Hall of Fame, George Rogers, who had a great career, also a Heisman Trophy winner, and Ezekiel Elliott, who's now still playing for the Dallas Cowboys. He also rushed for 1,000 yards the next 2 seasons. In his 4th year, he got 751 yards, but at that point, it was a Kirk Cousins team, and they threw the ball a lot. Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Reed, they had receivers. And so this is the sad part about being a 6th-round pick and playing running back where careers get used up quickly. When it came time for a new contract, and because he was not a first-rounder, after 4 years he became a free agent, and he thought he might get rewarded for what he did. No, of course. It was Bruce Allen. Bruce Allen lowballed him, of course, which is what Bruce Allen liked to do. That's what cost the team Kirk Cousins. And the best offer he had was with the Dallas Cowboys, and so he took it and was a backup there to Ezekiel Elliott for a couple of years. He also played with the 49ers a little bit, the Cardinals, the Giants, bounced around, and now he's out of football. So there's a local show that's a team-produced show that they do, and he was on it and was talking about his career. It's always nice, when you bring back guys to talk to. It's called the Next Man Up podcast, and he was asked if he, even though he played for these other teams, whether or not he still considered himself a Washington player. Do you consider Washington the home team? And here's what he said. It's Alfred Morris. Without a doubt, that's where I started at, and I would love the end someday, sometime, maybe like do it what some other guys do, a one-day contract. We'll work on that down the road. But he says he's Washington through and through. This is a guy who absolutely should get that and should be honored by the team before a game. Not this week because they're retiring Darryl Green's number, well-deserved, 20 years with the team, Hall of Fame, all that. Yes, he deserves all that. And then the Bears game is going to get a lot of attention, obviously, for the two quarterbacks. But at one game this year or maybe next year, yeah, absolutely have him retire as a Washington player because – if you look at that run that they made in 2012, yes, they won their last 7 games, but Robert Griffin III got hurt in the 14th game, that Baltimore game. 13th game, 13th game. Then Cousins played the 14th. Griffin had to get himself back on the field, but he couldn't run. And all he did was hand off to Alfred Morris against Philadelphia, and against Dallas when they clinched the division. Morris had 200 yards in that game. He was the difference. So this is a guy who is so overlooked in the success they had. It's all about RG3, and he was great. But if you want to look at the guy who locked up the playoffs, it was Alfred Morris. He was the bell cow. And there's a very poignant scene at the end of the Dallas game where Griffin's got his arm around Alfred Morris as if to say, hey, we're going to do this here for a long, long time. It didn't work out for Griffin. Morris still continued to run the ball, but when it came time to reward him for being the good soldier that he was, Bruce Allen goes, yeah, here's a low ball offer. And he winds up signing with Dallas, which he didn't want to play for because he was also a guy that would, before the games, he would sit with the stadium workers, the people who cleaned up the stadium, and talk to them. He was a real mensch. And I think Alfred Morris deserves this honor, and I would love to see the team do that, sign him to a one-day contract so he can retire as a Washington player. All right, we'll get to Jerry Jones next and the blow-up that happened yesterday on his radio show. I think it's a little bit overblown, and I'll have my explanation of that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Bram Weinstein coming up at 11 o'clock, and actually this would be a good topic for Bram. He does the Commanders games on the radio, but he also does a show here, and I think he has the license to criticize. He might pump his brakes a little bit in that he does collect a check, I think, from the team I think he works that way, to do the games. But I think he's generally been objective on the way he talks about the team. And, how it worked here for a long time, most of, if not all of the Dan Snyder era, he had an employee named Larry Michael. And Larry Michael did the games on the radio, but he also did the media for the team. He did a daily television show, which was on then Comcast Sportsnet. I guess Ted's new operation, Monumental, doesn't do anything but the teams he owns, the Caps and the Wizards. It's all about that. But in those days, that was their outlet, and he did a very positive program on how even though the team was horrible, And when he'd line up the tail of the tape for each game when he'd make his prediction, almost always picking the team to win, he had something called skin tangibles, like, they'll find a way because of X, Y, and Z. And they were mostly losing seasons in the 16 seasons that he did it. And, people used to call him Baghdad Bob because he would never criticize the team. He was a team employee. Dan Snyder never did interviews, not with Larry that I remember. Bruce Allen did them. But he never asked Bruce Allen any tough questions. And when Bruce Allen would say something ridiculous like we're winning off the field, Larry never challenged him. That's the way it worked. So Jerry Jones in Dallas has a deal. I don't know what the radio station pays, but I'm sure it's a lot. We, at one point, the stations I worked for when I was back at the other station, we were paying a lot of money to broadcast Redskins games, and then we stopped doing it because we realized it wasn't needed. We were a sports talk station. We could operate without the games, and we did quite well not broadcasting the games. But the deal that they have with the station called 105.3, that's the frequency in Dallas, I guess as part of the deal, Jerry Jones comes on each week and talks about the team. And the hosts on the station, as far as I know, are not paid by Jerry. Now, they may get some extra money from this. I'm not sure how this works, but I think it's part of the package to broadcast the games that they get Jerry Jones once a week, and that's a huge thing. Everybody in Dallas is listening when Jerry comes on. So Jerry comes on yesterday in his usual spot. He's about to fly to Atlanta for the owners' meetings, but he keeps his commitment after an awful day on Sunday where they lost 47-9. They've lost their last 4 home games by an average of they've been outscored, I should say. They've given up, They've given up in their last 4 home games an average of 42 points a game. That includes the stomping they took from the Packers in the playoffs last year. It's been a complete embarrassment. And Jerry is testy. This one came on his 82nd birthday. But he still showed up, and he doesn't have a Larry Michael to ask him questions. That's why I give Jerry some credit here. I think he deserves some credit in this. Yes, he's getting criticized for the way he handled this, and I'll get to the part that everybody's talking about, but he's doing it. He showed up, and he stayed for 23 minutes on the show. He didn't say, I have to go. It was the hosts who said goodbye to him, and it was pretty cordial because sometimes it's context. And I listened to all 23 minutes of this, so I can tell you it's not what the headline says it is. Yeah, there's a testy part to it, which we will get to. But the hosts asked the proper questions. I did this for years with Steve Zabin, and for 2 years we had the Steve Spurrier show. We asked Spurrier tough questions. He didn't run from anything, never complained about us. Then Joe Gibbs comes in, and we did the first year with Gibbs. He didn't like the questions he was getting from us, so he told the team the following year he wasn't going to do it with us. And Bram, who was the beat reporter, would go out to Redskins Park and interview him at the time, and that was fine. And Bram asked good questions then. And then we had Jim Zorn, and Jim Zorn didn't like the questions we were asking him. So they had Kevin Sheehan and Tom Lavero go out there, and he didn't get it either. In fact, in his second year, I think they were like 1-3, and Kevin asked him, do you think you might get fired? And Zorn went crazy. What do you mean, getting fired? What are you talking about? Well, they wanted him to quit. That's when they took the play calling away, and they did fire him at the end of the season when he went 4-12. But, these radio shows, the ones that they did here with Larry for years and years, nothing like this would have happened because he wouldn't have challenged anybody on anything. So good for these hosts for doing what they're doing, but also good for Jerry. Jerry does this, and he's always been good with the media. He does a news conference after every game. Whether you like that or not, at least he's facing the music. He faced the music after this 47-9 game. So, there's a lot of things about Jerry to criticize, including the fact that he's the general manager. And we'll get to that. He shouldn't be the general manager. But he did have this initial success, and he didn't like the fact that Jimmy Johnson got all the credit. So he wanted to be the builder. And he identifies himself as GM first, owner second. It's not working out too well, though. They did have some 12-win seasons. They made the playoffs last year with 12 wins and had a home game. So something is working somewhat right, but, when it comes to getting over the hump. He can't seem to do it. And now he's got a team, and he's mismanaged the salary cap, and he's paying too much money to two players, Dak Prescott and C.D. Lamb, and he doesn't have enough depth on the team, so they start to get injuries like to Micah Parsons, and that's when things start to fall apart. But this is how things, kind of started out, and it started out with a legitimate question, and I think a solid answer from Jerry.
So you still look at this as a championship-level team with the expectations of winning a title this year?
I look at it as we played this Detroit team, which is one of the top teams in my mind. We play a top team in San Francisco. The record doesn't show that today, but they are one of the top teams. We played a top team in Baltimore, and so we know we weren't up to the task against those. We've got to get better, and we've got to get out here. And the idea that you're going to make up the difference when we were wounded defensively, that still doesn't mean that your backup shouldn't come in here and really play well enough to make a game and really potentially get the game. But the idea that if you underestimate what being wounded on one side of the ball or the other, the idea of having complementary, quote, ball is not really valid if you think you're going to go out there and let them run through you or whatever your circumstances cause them to be able to run and play at will. Then that really doesn't work, that you'll make up for that on the other side of the ball. That's impacting the other side of the ball by the definition of complementary football. So we can do better as we get out and as we go down the road here of making adjustments relative to how each side of the ball are complementing each other.
Kind of a long-winded way of saying the defense was so horrible, the offense, was playing from behind and couldn't come back. Okay. Here's the part, and I played a big part of it. You've probably heard like a 30 or 40-second soundbite of Jerry threatening the jobs of the hosts. And again, I don't think they really work for him. I think he could, as we had with my situation and Zabe's situation, where two coaches said, we don't want to do it with them anymore because we were asking tough, legitimate questions. Not that Kevin and Tom didn't when they took over the Zorn show, or Bram didn't when he took over the Joe Gibbs show, but that's the prerogative. So when he's threatening to fire them, I don't think they work for him. He doesn't own the station. What he's kind of getting at here is I can ask for two other guys to host the show, and the station will probably comply because they love the fact that Jerry comes on and brings them great ratings. I'm sure the numbers for that segment that he does every week are through the roof. Everybody wants to hear what Jerry's going to say. So here's the album cut of what happened, and I think context tells you a lot. So here's the two hosts doing their job. And Jerry, who's 82, got a team that he thought was going to be a lot better, is playing like crap right now, and he's old and he's cranky.
You're aware of all the off-season topics.
Yeah, but what is your counter? What is your damn counter?
My counter
I really want to know where you would go get it. Now, don't tell me about should gotten a guy in the off-season.
Why not?
This isn't a damn word argument just because I'm not arguing with you. I'm dealing with how we line up against San Francisco, not what I did wrong last week or last month or 2 months ago or 2 years ago. If I really gave you guys a list of all the things I've done wrong over the last few years, you couldn't be on this program for the next 5 years steady and go over it. But every now and then you do some right things, and at the end of the day you add it up, and the rights give you a better spot than the wrongs. But if you think for any minute right now, there'll be one Super Bowl champion. What do the others do wrong? There's one Super Bowl champion. Now, we want to be that champion. And I'm sure not throwing the towel in today because of what happened out there Sunday. But I'm not going to sit here and waste a lot of energy, a lot of time. Let's talk about what I should have done back in 1907 or 2017. Shit, Ben. Come on. I've got more time than that, and I actually don't even have time on this great show for looking back at decisions.
Okay. So, Jerry, 1970, a little different from this past off season in building the team we're talking about today, which there was a lot of criticism that you guys didn't add, didn't spend, and don't add and don't spend and are not aggressive enough with some of the problems that are still haunting the Cowboys today that we see play out on the field. That's the point of talking about the offseason.
I remember those criticisms very well. Okay, so what?
Are they playing out to be accurate?
What's your point?
My point is, it seems like
Listen, let me tell you what I'll do. About it. I will let us sit down and look at the decisions we've made over the last several years. Okay? I'll look at it. Now, if you think I'm interested on a damn phone call with you over a radio and sitting here and throwing all the good out with the dishwater, you have got to be smoking something over there this morning. I'm not. And I really don't, and I don't even want our listeners to listen to me, to talk about, this is not your job. Your job isn't to let me go over all the reasons that I did something and I'm sorry that I did it. That's not your job.
Well, my job is to ask
why. Job, or I'll get somebody else to ask these questions, man.
Jerry, we're trying to figure out why the team is.
I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. You're not going to figure out what the team is doing right or wrong. If you are, or any 5 or 10 like you, you need to come to this meeting I'm going to today. There are 32 teams here. You're geniuses.
Jerry,
okay? Y'all really think you're going to sit here with a microphone and tell me all of the things that I've done wrong and without going over the rights?
Well,
now, listen, we both know we're talking to a lot of great fans and a lot of great listeners. And I am very sorry for what happened out there Sunday. I'm sick about what happened Sunday. Now, I'm not talking to these yahoos on the end of this phone. I'm talking to you, the fans that are listening this morning. And we can spend a lot of time going over zigging and zagging. One of the stupidest things I've ever done that anybody has ever analyzed is by the Cowboys. It was an idiot that did that. So idiot things can turn into good decisions. Okay? Smart things can turn into bad decisions.
Okay, but some say it was an idiot decision not to sign Derrick Henry, who probably wanted to sign with them, wound up in Baltimore, and is the leading rusher in the NFL on a team that may be knocking on the door for the Super Bowl. So they did ask legitimate questions. Jerry he didn't really threaten their jobs. He just said, I can get other people to ask these questions, which has been my experience with two coaches. Zabe and I asked questions that were apparently too tough for Joe Gibbs and too tough for Jim Zorn. They didn't like it, so they got other guys to ask the questions. That's their prerogative. We were doing our jobs. These guys are doing their jobs. This is how things sort of settle down a little bit. This is towards the end of the conversation. Again, it ends with the host saying goodbye, not Jerry hanging up like, I'm sick of this, I'm going away. So I give him some credit for that. And again, I give him credit for doing these interviews, not with a house organ, not with a house man like Larry Michael. These guys are legitimate hosts asking legitimate questions, and this is where it turned a little bit.
Jerry, why are you getting so mad at us? We're just asking you why the blowouts are happening, the historical differences at home. We're just asking about it on behalf of the fans, and you're getting real ticked off and mad at us. We're just
can I tell you something, guys? I don't get mad at people that I can not be with if I don't want to be with. I don't get mad. You're asking me for a response, and I'm giving you a response. We got to play better, and we got to play better at specific points. No, there's no looking for stepping out here and bringing in 20 new players between now and the bye. That's not the way it works. But I like the players that we have. You go around this league, and you will see a high recognition of the quality of players we've got. We should be able to not have happened to us Sunday with our players that we've got. Shouldn't have the highest paid quarterback in the NFL and not having have more production, but he's got to have blocking. He's got to have the routes run right. And the other thing he's got to do is it helps if he weren't playing somebody as strong as Detroit was Sunday. They were pretty strong. we hope we get a chance to show that those type of things I just mentioned works.
Yeah, well, against weaker teams. And we'll see. But they look like a weak team now. They're a defensive sieve, especially at home. So that's a mess. Couple of postscripts. Jeff Saturday was on PTI last night, former player in the league, and had that stint as an interim coach with Indianapolis, and he's probably back at TV to stay, but played a long time in the league. So when he was on with Tony and Mike last night, they asked him how the players react to this, and does this have any effect on the players when an owner kind of goes off like this?
It's amusing if it's just your owner. When it's your owner and your general manager, it becomes an issue. And I think that's the problem with me with Jerry and Steven is there's not a lot of differentiation between is this guy my owner or is he my general manager? Because that's a different conversation. So can it have impact? Absolutely. And when you feel like it's becoming a distraction and now every question you're answering becomes about your general manager, it does become a problem. And so whatever he's going through, he needs to get out of the system during this bye week, because when they hit the field, they need all arrows pointing one direction, not worried about what Jerry's doing off the field.
And this is an important distinction. He's absolutely right that Jerry, because he identifies himself as the GM, it matters. And he's the one that picked the players. He's the one that works with whoever's in charge of massaging the salary cap to put them in this position where they're really up against it. And so much money is invested in two players, with CeeDee Lamb getting the big contract, one of the highest paid receivers in the league, and Dak Prescott, the highest paid quarterback now at $60 million a year. It puts you in a position where you just don't have enough depth. You see the value of a rookie quarterback, and a team that had salary cap room with the Commanders. They've apparently got some depth, and it's now going to be tested a little bit with Jonathan Allen out for the rest of the year. Last thing on this is that Diana Rossini of The Athletic got in touch with Jerry about this and about the react to all of this yesterday. And this is what Jerry said. He said, I don't know that I would go as far as calling the volume connotation as yelling. And I would agree with that. He didn't yell there. He got upset with them, but he didn't yell. He also said, but the facts are that if I'm going to be grilled by the tribunal, I don't need it to be by the guys I'm paying. Well, yeah, I don't really know how that works. It would seem to me that they're actually paying him because if it were people that he was paying, he'd have a Larry Michael to ask the questions, not these guys. He says, I can take it from fans and take it from other people. I take a lot of pride in how fair and how much I try to work with the media. We're brothers and sisters, and it's 100% true. The media loves this guy. He always calls you back. Ask any reporter who's dealt with him over the, 35 years that he's owned the Cowboys. They love this guy. And he is cooperative. And we saw an owner here who treated the media like dirt on the bottom of his shoe. Understand that. He said, but, and he's, I guess he's a little bit of contrition there. He says, I was a little frustrated there today. The wrong ones were doing the questioning. Now, if those had been real fans sitting there, or if there had been people that knew what they were talking about, football people, I might have a different answer. Now, that's a shot at them. And if you think, Jerry, in what you call real fans, I think real fans are critical of the team. They're frustrated by what you're doing. And what these guys are doing, what any good host does, is ask questions that fans want to know. So we'll see what happens in the next show. My guess is, this is just my guess, I don't have any inside information, but if Jerry goes to the station manager and says, yeah, I'll continue to do the show, but you're going to have to get me other guys, I would say that the station manager may stick up for them to a degree, but I don't know him, her, whoever it is. But my experience is, if that's what Jerry demands, that's what will happen because of what he means in terms of programming to the radio station. So we'll see where it goes. I think Jerry gets over this. I think he's back with the same guys the next week. The phone call ended, I thought, cordially, and I don't think he's going to demand different hosts. And if they have another stinker, they'll probably ask the same questions, and they should, for the sake of the audience and for the sake of their careers, because you don't want to be seen as a spineless jellyfish, basically. And I don't know, they can't have any credibility with their audience either if they do that. Because if you do a suck-face interview with Jerry and then come on after he's off and criticize him, that doesn't work either. So something's got to give here, and I think it's going to be Jerry that's going to give, and he's going to get over this, and we'll be back on next week, and or whenever the next show is. I guess they got a bye week coming up. Then I think that as he has in the past, he'll get over it. And I know Dale Hansen very well. Dale Hansen it was for many years the Kingpin TV guy in Dallas. He just retired a couple of years ago. And he was actually doing their games on the radio for a couple of years as an analyst. They didn't have an ex-player. They had Dale doing it with Brad Sham. And when he'd get on TV, he'd rip Jerry, and Jerry was okay with it. And then they go have a drink together. That's kind of the way he is. That's kind of the way he operates. All right, that is a wrap for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.